So that's Shaq giving Caitlin Clark some credit right to the face of Angel Reese. Angel Reese sitting there gritting her teeth.
Shaquille O'Neal couldn't help but give Caitlin Clark some serious props, and he did it right in front of Angel Reese. Reese, sitting there with a clenched jaw, probably never imagined that Shaq's appearance would end up being all about praising Clark. In fact, it seemed like Reese's own podcast turned into a tribute to Clark, with little room for her own spotlight. What was supposed to be Reese's moment to shine turned into an unexpected stage for Caitlin Clark's greatness. Each episode of Reese's podcast, Unapologetically Angel, somehow found itself circling back to Clark, whether it was a guest bringing her up or Reese herself. It was like a running theme. Anytime you talk about women's basketball, you talk about
Unapologetically Clout-Chasing Caitlin Clark podcast. I think that's what it's called. Unapologetic Clout-Chasing of Caitlin Clark podcast.
Notice the irony, and social media lit up with memes suggesting that maybe Reese should just rebrand the podcast as The Caitlin Clark Show, with Angel Reese as the guest. It became clear that no matter what topic the conversation started on, it always ended up circling back to Caitlin Clark, her stats, her game-changing plays, and her undeniable influence on the sport. Now, to be fair, Angel Reese has said there's no beef with Clark, but the media has loved to stoke the fire. The comparisons are everywhere, and for someone like Reese, who's trying to carve out her own space, that constant comparison can feel a bit like an unwanted shadow. Some fans think Reese might even be using Clark's name to stay relevant, especially in a sport as competitive as women's basketball. Others, though, believe it's just a sign of Clark's massive influence. She's that good, and that hard to ignore. Then came Shaq. When the basketball legend appeared on Reese's podcast, there was a bit of hope that his larger-than-life personality would help shift the conversation back to Reese. But instead, Shaq ended up adding
It's like, oh my goodness, Cheryl doesn't like her, so let's see what this is about. And, like, all of that's stupid to me. Mm-hmm. It's not true, it's all stupid. And also, now they may be mad when I say this, because it's funny to me. Like, when I look at the number 22s in the league, like I was 22, Asia's 22, Caitlin's 22, like those are some hell of a good number 22s. And we're all a part of the Nike family.
Because of women's basketball, whenever you think of Angel Reese, people often mention Caitlin Clark. You've said in interviews, there's no beef, but the media keeps going on. This is your platform, so how do you feel about that situation?
I think just being able to be in that moment of it happening, you never realize how something can literally change your life. And knowing my 5 fingers and my other finger.
Shaq doubled down on the praise, talking about how impressive Caitlin Clark is, right in front of Angel. It didn't stop there. Shaq also got a little cheeky, pointing out that Reese's layup technique could use some work, even joking about her chances for Rookie of the Year. The whole thing was a little awkward, to say the least, and left Reese squirming in her seat. What started as an attempt for Angel Reese to shine a light on her own career ended up being an entire episode of Clark Love, complete with some brutally honest commentary from one of the NBA's biggest stars. It's a reminder of just how much Clark has changed the landscape of women's basketball, and how difficult it is for anyone to escape her shadow, even when Shaquille O'Neal made some serious waves when he appeared on Angel Reese's podcast. What was supposed to be Angel's big moment quickly turned into a conversation about Caitlin Clark, leaving Reese visibly uncomfortable. But it wasn't just about praise for Clark. Shaq's journey from Clark skeptic to a full-on supporter unfolded right before our eyes, and it was clear that O'Neal wasn't afraid to eat his words. In the high-stakes world of basketball, changing your opinion isn't always easy. It can be seen as a weakness, especially when you're a big name like Shaq. Yet, when he grabbed the mic on Reese's podcast, he was ready to admit that his previous take on Clark was totally off base. So, what could have possibly swayed Shaq, the LSU loyalist and self-proclaimed Caitlin Clark skeptic, to completely flip the script? Before we dive deeper into that, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We appreciate you taking the time to watch. Now let's get back to the action. Why do people love Caitlin Clark? Besides her remarkable skills, it's her ability to sink threes from way beyond the arc, something we've never really seen before. Shaq compared it to what Steph Curry does in the NBA. I love Steph Curry because I've never seen anyone shoot like that. Well, Caitlin Clark is doing the same thing, but on the women's side, and Shaq couldn't ignore it anymore. At first, Shaq's allegiance to LSU and his close relationship with Angel Reese had him doubting Clark's abilities. During the 2023 National Championship game, where LSU triumphed over Iowa, Shaq's skepticism was on full display. He was rooting for LSU, so he didn't exactly give Clark the credit she deserved. This wasn't just a fleeting moment of partisanship. Shaq's loyalty to LSU and his mentorship of Reese created a real conflict in his mind, one that initially...
Besides her skills.
She can shoot threes from logo.
We never seen that before. That's my point. Steph Curry, a little kid. Like, Steph Curry, I love, you know why I love Steph Curry? Because I never seen...
Something changed. As Clark continued to dominate on the court, Shaq had no choice but to admit he was wrong. On Reese's podcast, he finally came clean. She's doing things we've never seen before. Nobody's done this consistently. It was in that moment of brutal honesty that Shaq admitted, I was a hater. Every time Clark hit a shot that Shaq thought was impossible, he was forced to face the truth. She was the real deal. Shaq's transformation wasn't just a one-time thing. It wasn't just about one game or one shot. It was about Clark's ability to perform consistently and rise above the doubts placed on her. Shaq put it simply, if I say 10 times you're not going to hit that shot, and you hit it, that means you're the truth. This powerful moment on the podcast was a reflection of Shaq's growing admiration for Clark and the undeniable impact she was having on the game of women's basketball. His transformation from skeptic to supporter wasn't just a personal shift.
Stuff we never seen before. Never seen nobody do that on a consistent basis. There's a lot of girls in WNBA that have done it in spurts, but you know that game I'm watching y'all in the Final Four, I'm like, damn, like, and I was a hater because you know I'm down. She was like, she's not gonna hit that shot, and bam, like, damn. She's not going to hit that shot, man. Like, if I say 10 times you're not going to hit the shot and you hit the shot.
What started as doubt became full-on respect. The irony, of course, is that all of this played out on Angel Reese's podcast. What was supposed to be her chance to shine ended up as yet another chapter in Caitlin Clark's remarkable story. They're trying to do their own thing. Here's a revised version of the script, designed to appeal to an American audience between the ages of 30 and 70, maintaining the tone and focus while emphasizing the ironic and awkward moments in the interaction. Shaquille O'Neal's appearance on Angel Reese's podcast couldn't have been more awkward. Not only was he there as a mentor and supporter of Reese, but he ended up publicly praising her biggest competitor, Caitlin Clark, right in front of her. This moment serves as a microcosm of the shifting landscape in women's basketball, where Clark's exceptional talent is forcing even the most entrenched skeptics to reconsider their stance. Shaq, known for his straightforwardness, couldn't help but admit, Caitlin plays the right way. She makes the right play every time. She makes her teammates better. She can shoot the ball. She's a great player. As he dove into his newfound admiration for Clark, it was clear this wasn't the kind of mentorship Reese had been expecting from her idol. Imagine inviting your mentor onto your podcast, expecting praise and support, only to have them sing the praises of your biggest rival. That's exactly the situation Angel Reese found herself in when Shaq couldn't stop talking about Caitlin Clark. The tension in the virtual studio was thick, with Reese trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground, but Shaq pressed on, clearly impressed by Clark's abilities. Reese, who was expecting a major boost for her career, had a hard time hiding her discomfort. As Shaq praised Clark's ability to sink threes from deep range, Reese interjected, trying to shift the conversation. She said, let's start from the beginning. Why do you think people like Caitlin Clark, besides her skill...
Has your relationship been with Angel?
She's like a daughter to me, so I'm gonna protect her. I'll call her every and just mess with her. But
Clark only grew as he continued to rave about her. But the situation took an even more awkward turn when Shaq made a comparison that caught everyone off guard. He referred to Reese as the female Antoine Jamison, a player who was solid but never truly regarded as a Hall of Famer. For Reese, this was a blow. The comparison was a far cry from the superstar treatment she was likely expecting. Antoine Jamison? It felt like a backhanded compliment, and Reese was clearly offended. Shaq tried to backtrack, saying, she probably knows who Jamison is, she's a basketball fan. But the damage was done. The comparison landed like a lead balloon, and viewers couldn't help but notice how it highlighted just how far off Shaq's praise for Clark had gone. The truth was, Shaq was telling Reese to her face that Caitlin Clark was simply better than her. What was supposed to be a moment of guidance and mentorship turned into a strange...
Besides her skill, because she can shoot logo threes. Angel Reese, do you understand the question that was been brought up to you? Why do they like her besides her skill? Shooting three is a skill. Are we having some comprehension issues that...
abilities. As the episode wore on, it became more and more clear that Reese had invited Shaq onto her podcast hoping for support, but instead, he turned it into a love letter to Clark. The irony of the situation was not lost on fans. Instead of shining a light on Angel Reese's personality and achievements, the podcast had become just another platform for Caitlin Clark's growing legend. The tension in the air was palpable, and the uncomfortable dynamic between mentor and mentee only emphasized just how much Clark had shifted. Angel Reese's podcast, once meant to showcase her personality and achievements, had unwittingly morphed into yet another stage for Caitlin Clark's growing legend. Social media exploded with reactions, with some fans joking that Clark should be considered the true host of the show given how often her name came up. Then there was Shaq's unexpected comparison of
Antoine Jameson. Most people, trust me, she was offended.
She didn't know who that was.
She probably does. She's a basketball fan. She probably does. But, I mean, Antoine Jameson ain't cracking nobody's top 200 in NBA history. And this woman thinks she's one of the greatest WNBA players or greatest women's basketball player.
1,000 points to his name, but one who's largely forgotten in NBA history. You remind me of Antoine Jameson, Shaq said. Nice player, put up 20,000 points, but no one's really heard of him. It was a punch in the gut to Reese, who was hoping for a much more encouraging and supportive conversation. And all of this played out right in front of her on her own show. As the podcast drew to a close, the full weight of what had transpired began to sink in. This wasn't just an awkward interview, it was a microcosm of the larger shifts happening in women's basketball. Shaq's surprising praise for Caitlin Clark on Reese's own platform highlighted just how undeniable Clark's impact on the sport had become. Even the biggest stars in women's basketball were forced to reckon with her rising.
Not a star, certainly not a superstar, not a legend. Hey, you remind me of Antoine Jameson. Oh, nice player. Put up 20,000 points. No one's really heard of him. I think Antoine played at North Carolina. Anyway, Shaq slams Angel Reese.